Good evening, or whenever you're watching this. Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast, Episode 2. Before we begin, thanks to last week's participant, Bobby C. and Miss Ashley from No Religion Required. Go check them out. Good show. New episodes up today. So, after one show, I feel like I've covered Christianity sufficiently, so let's go on to a much less controversial topic, Islam. Paul is the host of Quranify Me, as he calls it, the one true examination of the Quran. As he says, he writes hilarious skits and postulates scathing rants which will tickle your childish funny bone while inspiring the raging beast within you to demand accountability from Muslims the world around. I'm excited to talk to Paul tonight about some serious and some non-serious topics, so we may bounce around from the silly to the inspirational tonight. And happy World Hijab Day. How the heck are you, Paul?
I'm doing quite well. How are you doing? That was a very motivational introduction. I'm pumped right now.
Trying to talk you up a little bit, you know?
Hey, I need all the help I can get, so that's good with me.
So let's go back a little bit. How were you able to combine your love of Islam and 80s hair metal music into one podcast?
Look, this isn't an easy thing for a lot of people to do. It takes a truly unique person to be able to pull that off. I feel I'm that unique person. You have to do it. Anybody who's spent 5 minutes reading that book knows that there's no way you're going to get through a podcast based on an examination of the Quran without some kind of edutainment elements to it. And, if I can get you to spend 3 minutes listening to the smooth baritones of my voice in a parody song to get you to learn something, hey, I'll take what I can get, and I'll count those as victories every single time.
Yeah, you can for sure. But what got you kind of going? Like, how did you say, first of all, the idea, like, I want to do this, and then getting it actually rolling?
Which part, the podcast or the songs?
Well, the podcast. We can move on to your music studio and your label in a minute.
Well, for the podcast, the serious thing with the podcast was I, like many other people coming out of belief, found my niche, I guess you could say, on Twitter. That worked for me. That medium works for me. So as an atheist, as a newborn atheist, I would be out there. I'd be talking to new fellow atheists. I'd be talking to Christians. I'd be debating Christians, and I would also debate Muslims. One of the issues I ran into was I realized I didn't know what the hell I was talking about when it came to the foundational document for their belief system. So I said, screw it. That's a challenge. I love challenges. Let me learn what this Quran thing is all about. So I was going to, I grabbed the Twitter name and I was going to just tweet funny things or insight or whatever that I came across as I was reading it in my personal time. And it was the first surah of the Quran. I realized this is so stupid. There's no way, Twitter's just not going to work. And I don't feel like doing a blog. I had 3 other blogs at the time, and had started playing around with another podcast at one point. And I said, screw it, let me try this. So that's what it was born out of, was a project for me to push me to complete the reading of this book, because I knew if I had just read it on my own in a vacuum, I would have never finished it. Never.
Well, how far are you on the book at the moment?
Well, on air, we're in the 7th surah. In my research, I've got to read ahead because this thing is so horrible. I can't produce as much as I do and stay on that kind of schedule. So I will steal time here and there to actually get ahead of myself. So I'm only 10 surahs into the entire Quran, which, according to my Kindle, is about 33% of the Quran. There's a lot to go, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, how is it actually laid out? Because I've listened to a bunch of Christian kind of podcasts, and they talk about, well, former Christian podcasts, I guess, and they talk about how the kind of the Old Testament's actually about 70% of the whole Bible. So how is it laid out, and is it all the official? Don't tell me you're learning Arabic for this, because that'd be painful.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. The Quran is unique For any of the folks who are going to listen to this who are coming from or watch this, who are coming from a Christian background, ex-Christian background, the Quran is not structured like the Bible is, and it's actually you've got to do a little bit of research every time you read something, because what it does is it will mix up the time periods, not on purpose. I haven't come across reliable information that I can validate on why it's laid out like it is. But essentially, the Quran starts with the longest surah, the cow, and goes to the shortest surah. That's how it's laid out. Now, for anybody trying to read it, what does that mean to you? Well, it means there's two periods, the Meccan period and the Medinan period, when Muhammad was supposedly having these revelations. And the nuance to that is there's a very tangible difference in how lovable of a character Mo is, depending on which city he was living in at the time. So, for anybody who wants to torture themselves enough to actually read it, that's something to keep in mind. Or when you're debating that Muslim friend of yours in the coffee break room about the Quran, find out which period of the surah that person's quoting as why Islam is such a lovable little religion, because more often than not, it's going to be a Meccan surah that they're talking about, which was early days. That's when Mo was without his armed henchmen and pretty much powerless. So he was a lot nicer of a guy. Strangely enough, when he moves over to Medina and he gets a little bit of money and a couple guys willing to go to war for him, that's when you notice the tone in the Quran changed to more of a violent type of doctrine.
Yeah, I read one kind of biography of Muhammad, and it's definitely an interesting contrast to the Jesus story, because Jesus kind of was like, I kind of compare him to my college alma mater, Missouri Tigers, in that when he got to the big time, he usually got smacked down, but Muhammad actually, was a ruler during his time period. But so do we have a lot in terms of history, kind of like the Bible, like when these were written down as opposed to when they're originally spoken, and questions as to what the actual, real, authentic version is?
Well, that's one of the neat things that everybody can relate to, even if they're Christian or ex-Christian. There's a lot of debate about that, just like in Christianity, biblical history. Everybody claims to have the truth. Everybody claims to know the true background, but there's very few people who actually agree on it. But it's the Reader's Digest version is Mo had all his scribes following him all over ancient Arabia as he was holding these these sessions, these public sessions, talking to people about these revelations and this message. He actually had his scribes following him around, jotting all this stuff down. Excuse me. But the time period all the way through the compilation was from Mo's life, so a little bit different than Jesus, because he's actually there while they're jotting this stuff down, to hundreds of years later, when they actually settled on the agreeable context of the Quran and why there was. One of the neat things about that, though, is there's a lot of research out there that even while Mo was alive, he would actually sit down with his scribes and, hey, let's do a script review. What did I say? Okay, well, that doesn't come across sounding very good, so we need to change it to this. They would actually do that little political exercise with this revealed message from God and make sure that it was flowered up to, reach whatever objective they had at that time.
So he kind of like had a script doctor, like for a Hollywood movie, clean it up a little bit at the end.
Are you sure you really want to say this here, Mo? I don't think you want to say that.
So how do you make the transition? I mean, you kind of start as a podcaster, but you've kind of transitioned in a way to like becoming an activist. Like, how do you make that transition, and how do you kind of, I guess, reach out to people, because you've been talking to people all around the world, not just about the show, but about what's happening in individual countries?
Well, one of the beautiful things about being a humanist is you actually give a shit about other people besides yourself. All intentions of starting this podcast were to push me to finish reading the Quran. That was it. I was going to read through it, every episode was going to be a reading of the Quran, and I was going to check out and be done. By episode 10, I realized I was getting extremely bored with that because the Quran is a horrible book, an absolutely horrible book. But in addition to that, I started seeing some things. I started getting emails. I started getting direct message tweets, etc., where people were reaching out to me. And then, lo and behold, episode 15, 16 happened with Iman, at One Godless Woman on Twitter. She was willing to come talk to me and educate me, and that's one of the great things. I come off as this expert. Well, I believe I try to play an expert on TV, even though I only stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. But she was kind enough to come onto the show and be a first interview and teach me about all these little nuances about different various cultures, all within Islam. And I started realizing I like this. I like learning, even if it's in the middle of the show or in the middle of a interview. I'm learning something from her. Other people probably want to hear this, so I started doing interviews. The more interviews that I actually was able to grab, and all those interviews that I wasn't able to get but had long discussions with people about, I started getting the personal side of it. I started seeing the personal tragedy associated with the belief system. And I realized that, I know it's going to kill some people who might stumble across this in the future, but, Muslims, ex-Muslims, they're no different than us. They were indoctrinated just like all us ex-Christians were. Their challenges may be a little different, but they're all the same. They're in pain and they're suffering too. And unfortunately, in the Western world, I didn't feel like we were doing all that we could to address this. We spent, and to be honest with you, Zach, I get frustrated when I know that there are, when I read Ayan Hirsi Ali or I read stats on female genital mutilation and how many girls around the world are going through this, and then I see 1,000 atheists getting irate about a Jesus plaque in a school, I really have to question where we put our energy. That's the humanist in me. If I did a cost benefit and I only have so much time and energy, where am I going to invest that energy? And I think about that, that little kid suffering. Why are we so silent here, but yet we'll spend so much energy talking about things like that? So I said, screw it. If I'm going to bitch about it, if I'm going to complain about it, I better own up to it and start doing something myself. And that's kind of how the activism really got engaged. I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world, and that meant I needed to start doing stuff. And it was really easy because, again, anybody who wants to go listen to 15, 16 with Iman, episode 20 with Ensaf, way back in the spring when we talked about Raif Badawi, the Saudi blogger whose lashings just started 2 weeks ago and now finally has the attention of a lot of folks in the Western world. Stuff like that hits you at your core, man. You can't, I shouldn't talk about anybody else, but there's no way I can hear those stories and just sit on my hands and then go off and watch the next sporting event and forget about it. I can't let those things go. So unfortunately for those I annoy, I've got a lot of energy and I don't anticipate the activism going away anytime soon.
Well, by all means, keep annoying. I think it's appropriate that you mentioned kind of the worldly issues that are going on, because we got kind of sucked into a world event a couple weeks ago. So your last episode, where you came out of your sabbatical, was for you did an interview with Joseph in Paris. And I thought that was a really good interview because you got to talk about, as you mentioned before, kind of the cultural issues in France going on that may have led to the Charlie Hebdo massacre and then the other events going on. So I don't know, because of that event happened, was that just spurred you to action? Like you had to get back in the podcasting game?
It was a combination of things.
If you hear meowing in the background, it's my cat. It's okay. He's being treated fine.
I won't hate you for that. I promise you. You're too nice. You're one of the best guys to give me a hard time on Twitter to keep me sharp. So I will not hate you that you have a feline fetish. That's your.
Yeah, we're open to other views and here in the Zachrilege cast.
Um, there were a couple things coming together. You know, all the stuff with Iman, with Raif Badawi. I mean, that stuff had been going on for months. Me trying to help move that. The Mubarak Bala situation in Nigeria, where he was an atheist, maybe not wisely, slightly unwise to be as public as he was, who was forcibly hospitalized, his life threatened, and the atheist reaction to that situation. Australia, Boko Haram again, you know, and then all these things were building up during the sabbatical, and then with this Charlie Hebdo situation, it was just time. And I had a neat resource because of a secret group I belonged to on Facebook, where this guy was walking us through what was happening, and I'm a very affective person. I operate on my emotions. It's helped me survive this long. I'm gonna keep going. And watching that happen, and how quickly people were willing to shift the responsibility, shift the focus. And I knew a lot of folks were going to come out and say things, so I figured I needed to say it as well while the iron was hot, because unfortunately, one of the things we tend to do is we tend to care a whole lot for a very short period of time, and then we move on very quickly to the next distraction. So I had to strike while the iron was hot and make sure I start framing thinking out there. If there's one thing I can do besides obviously change the life of somebody stuck in a bad situation in some, you know, Muslim-dominated culture, it's to start reframing the way we think about things. You know, yes, I'm talking to you, Ben Affleck, guys like that. We cannot let them run the dialogue, at least not quietly. He may have much more of a reach than I do, but I'm not going to be silent on it. We have to start re-examining that, and that was part of the intent on that episode 45 to come back from the sabbatical, was to get Joseph to come on and share that with us, get a little bit of insight into France, because that has been an area of interest for me because of all the cultural and religious and political nuances to France. But again, it's to make sure that while I'm on the sabbatical, I didn't loosen the strings enough to on that reframing of the dialogue happening in, you know, the form of public opinion.
Yeah, there's this. It was kind of disturbing. It's disturbing what happened in France, but then the reaction was also more disturbing. This bizarre. I thought the term that came up in my mind was kind of tyranny of reduced expectations. Like, oh,
Right.
they're Muslims, therefore we have to expect them to react not as civilized as other people, and that's okay because they're a different culture. And it's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
If you want people to be part of the world community, then you have to kind of, I mean, I know the religious people have kind of like the God, then family, then rest of humanity kind of thing going, but on our side, we're more like humanity first. But it's hard to. So what about that? I mean, you think about that kind of reaction. Plus, what about the term Islamophobia? I'm guessing you're not a big fan.
Yeah, not at all. It's a tactic. That's all it is. It's a linguistic tactic, leveraging white guilt. I'll say it. I know a lot of people won't. I've got no problem saying it. I'm at that age in my life right now where I don't care anymore about what people think. Shit has happened throughout world history. Okay, all races, all people have done horrible things to each other. We decide whether or not to turn the corner. When we keep using terms like this, and when we allow people to use terms like this unchallenged, we're not turning that corner. It's not healthy for the discussion. So yeah, that Islamophobe, absolutely useless. I'll challenge it every time I hear it. Imperialism, Western imperialism, I'll challenge that to the end of days, because guess what Arabs were doing to Arabs long before white people ever set foot in Arabia? They were just as imperialistic. It's human nature. That's what we are. That's the species that we are. So I would encourage anybody, get comfortable with that, because that's what that tactic is used for. Don't get them questioning yourself, because that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to refocus the attention off of an issue, because you have effectively reduced that wiggle room for them. You've got them in a situation they're going to have a hard time talking their way out of. So what's the good thing to do? We're going to deflect attention now. I'm going to project it back onto you and get you in the corner, putting your hands up trying to fend off the blows. Don't even get into that fight, and that's what that is. That's the only reason. Now, before anybody misconstrues this, I am not saying that there aren't racists out there. There aren't prejudices, bigots, and biases. Of course there are. If you listen to my back episodes, all the way from the beginning of the show, one of the first disappointments that I experienced was I realized that simply by the branding of my show, I was attracting an audience I didn't want. Not everybody, but a small minority of my listenership, were people I didn't want any association with, and I'm specifically calling out, those people who talk about nationalism, but it's really just a cover for their racism. I don't want an association with those kind of people, so I'll call them out as well on that. And I'm not saying that there aren't phobic behaviors displayed by people. However, when you are in a discussion, when you are criticizing, analyzing Islam, and you get that reaction, what I do, to be honest with you, I look at that as a point, as if we were fencing. That's a point for me because that means I hit you. That means I got you where you didn't want to be gotten. And those are victories for me every time I hear it. Every time I hear it.
Well, and it's almost funny for someone to, if anyone would like accuse you of Islamophobia, it's like, hey, you're the guy reading the book. You're actually, I mean, the reason you're a little afraid is because you're actually learning about what it actually is and what it is supposed to mean. But
yeah, well, and I mean, it's such a stupid term. What is Islam? Islam isn't a people; it's an idea. So I'm phobic of an idea. Well, actually, I'll be honest with you. The idea of Islamism scares the living shit out of me. It should scare the living shit out of anybody. If you study Islam, you study the basic tenets and the doctrine, it should scare you. It should frighten you to know what Muslims were called to do dating back 1400 years to present. Now, we make ourselves feel safe by calling them extremists. They're not extremists. They're adherents. They're the most faithful adherents to the faith. So, yeah, Islam as an ideology, it is a fearful thing. Muslims are human beings. They're victims of indoctrination just like us. So there's a distinction that needs to be made anytime that term is brought up.
Now you have a different kind of point of view doing your show as opposed to a lot of the atheist shows that focus on Christianity, because some people who are Muslims don't seem to do so well with criticism. So are you actually afraid of any kind of repercussions for doing this show, and what do you do to kind of protect yourself besides going on Google Hangouts?
Yeah, I'm absolutely not afraid whatsoever. That's the fact that I'm wearing a bandana and sunglasses and hiding behind my nice big professional mic that Zach picked on me about before we went on air has nothing to do with it. Yeah, it is an unsettling thought. There are at least 2, if not 3, watch-listed Islamic groups within a couple hours drive of where I live. That is unnerving. If I were by myself, and yeah, I'm not a superhero. I'm not Conan, so yeah, it would still be unsettling. The fact that I have family makes it even more unsettling. However, Dash, I think about this, and I do. 18 months into this podcast, and I still think about this. I can sit there and whine and cry, but you've never seen my face. I don't share my real name. I don't share my location, etc. There are ex-Muslims out there that are the face of progress. And if I'm going to sit here and pussyfoot around and cave to pressure, I can't do the mirror check in the morning when I look at somebody like, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, whose face is out there, Maryam Namazi. I mean, the hate that she puts up with on a daily basis. And, Ali Rizvi, him and his partner, recently on Facebook, there was a hate group that was started to specifically call Muslims for her death. I mean, those are the heroes. Those are the brave people right there. I'm just some dude who maybe has an opinion and a perspective that other people can identify with. A white Western audience can identify maybe with my voice a little more easily because we're all starting from the same starting point. So it is a concern, but again, I keep going. I love Gandhi to death, right? Be the change I want to see. Who am I to whine and complain about stuff if I'm not willing to do anything about it? And I invest a lot of time. One of the reasons I had to take this sabbatical was because as I add segments to the show, it takes the show's length stays the same, but the work grows. It started out about 20 hours a week. I'm now over 30 hours a week for each episode. I wouldn't invest that kind of time if it wasn't worth it in a bigger picture to me. And to be honest with you, I would feel hypocritical if I caved, if I gave up. And I know people are going to tell me to not frame it like that, but that's, you asked a question, I'm going to come back at you with how I feel about it. So yeah, I can't do that. There's no way.
Yeah, and it's about time someone listened to a white male anyway, right? It's about time.
Yeah, yeah, we're voiceless.
Power. So, yeah, speaking of gender, how did you acquire your harem of female supporters, like Heretic Woman, Nancy Drew, who have not only supporting your show, but they're actually contributing, skits and scenes and all that good stuff?
One of the neat thing, it's funny when you juxtapose the demographics, and I'm not talking about male female gender demographics. I'm talking about within the female gender, non-believers, believers. Muslim women absolutely hate me, but apostates and never been a Muslim women really, really, it's been, oh man, I can't even tell you how good it feels to hear their voices, to get that feedback from them when I do um, say something or produce something within the show. I will admit it very publicly that I am a feminist. Like like you said, Zach, white men don't get enough of a say, which is true, right? Ha ha. But women don't get enough of a say, and I'm very, very particular to being sensitive to that. And the Quran makes it extremely easy to pick out the misogyny and just the women hate that fills that book. Um, so it has definitely resonated with them, and it's neat because I'll open the show, and I always offer this up out there. I open the show to that female voice, like Heretic Woman coming on and doing her segments. I love having that. The few times I can get Amanda from Godless Family to do a little bit of research and script out her own stuff, I love being able to bring on those unveiled segments because I want to get that message out there. I want a different voice doing it, and we have to display that. We have to be the example, right? If I always talk about these things and I look, because it's a Quran show, if I look at the Muslim world and I want to empower women, and it's just me talking on that show, there's a little bit of a problem with it. So I absolutely love uh, from all the way from the female interview guests all the way through all those people who contribute. Nancy Drew doing meme after meme after meme because she wants to be part of it. So there's something there, and I'm not tapping into it for me or for the show, but more to give a voice to those women, just like I have had said over and over repeatedly to me during the sabbatical. Even though I'm not actively publishing the show, uh, I'm still active in those communities which have opened their arms to me. And I'll tell you what, the ex-Muslim community has been a godsend. Like how I fit that in there. They've been a godsend as far as accepting me in, teaching me, correcting me when I'm going wrong, and giving me all kinds of anecdotals behind the scenes that never hit the airwaves to try to help flesh out my perspective, give me a more comprehensive picture. So the same thing I hear from the women, the same thing I hear from the ex-Muslim community. Thank you for giving a voice to these issues, and I'm going to continue to do that because it needs to be said over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's very critical because I think we could probably talk for hours and hours about the role of women in kind of Abrahamic religions, and then to think, well, how are women treated in society in general? and how are they part of kind of the atheist movement as well, and what can we do to be inclusive and hear all voices. So I'm glad you're making that effort. So can you talk about the 50 for 50 campaign?
Ah, yes, the 50 by 50 campaign.
50 by
Um,
50. See, branding. It's anyway. Go ahead.
right. Well, I'm at I just published episode 45, so I've only got 5 more episodes to go. I haven't started working on 46, so this is good. You're giving me a good lead time. I appreciate it. What it is I know it's not necessarily a selfish thing. Uh, what I aimed to do was get 50 patrons by episode number 50. Even if everybody just was I shouldn't say just, let me reframe that. Even if everybody was a $1 patron per episode, or they limited it to $1 a month, it's not about the money for me. What it's about is knowing people you can say nice things, but knowing that people are out there and the show's actually resonating and people believe in it. I hear one thing over here, but then I'll look at some shows who have different formats, different messages, etc., that have 200, 300 patrons, atheist shows at that. So I know the community is there, the support is there. What I was trying to do with that effort was to see, is the community there, and are they willing? Because I donate to a couple, and I don't know how people take this, but I donate to a couple ex-Muslim charities, and I do contribute to AHA, which is Ayan Hirsi Ali's foundation, at least every couple of months when I can save up my Patreon dollars in an effort. All of that stuff is vectored towards helping and assisting disadvantaged women, abused women and children, and helping those outreach efforts into communities in the United States as well, which is a whole nother topic altogether. So that it was important to know that support was out there. Now, having said that, I don't think I'm going to meet my goal. I just got a new patron yesterday, which is really cool, but I'm still 16 shy. I tried to tease everybody and promised that I would go 4 times a month if I could get to my 50 by 50 patronage. And then I had somebody who was just as evil as me, and she said, "All right, you bastard, if that's the deal, then I'm going to up my patronage." And she went just overboard, ridiculous overboard, to make sure that I got to a separate goal, which now obligates me to do it 4 times a month. So when I do come back, everybody's going to get a face full of Quranify Me, probably more than they'd ever want.
And is that what is it? Is it Patreon.com/Quranify Me? Is that how it's done?
Patreon.com/Quranify Me.
Should support this guy because I do. So as a Patreon of the show, when do I get my stock options, or do I just get one warrior call? Is that it?
It all depends on your levels, and you can set your own levels. Now, there are some special people out there that get above and beyond, who I have in this thing that sits upon my shoulder is full of skits in the future. So what I want to hear from the Zach Nation is, once you get a couple episodes out there, is people are going to want to hear you in a skit, is what I'm going for. I'm trying to find that completely inappropriate, awkward skit that you're going to want to hide from your children in the future. It's in here. There's actually a couple of them in draft status. So that's another one of the privileges of being a patron.
Good thing is no kids, but there is a cat. I don't think he would really care about me being made fun of as long as the food dish is full. That's how it goes.
And actually, I'm going to be doing a certain little thing for my patrons here in the next couple weeks, but I gotta some logistical things I need to take care of first. So I don't want to say anything yet. Shh.
Yeah. If you want to call it Zachrilege Nation, you can call it Zachrilege, maybe cul-de-sac, because right now it's not even a driveway. But it's you got to start somewhere, they say.
That's right.
And really, the purpose of this show is to just show people, here's what's out there for you in the podcast land. And to get to know the personalities, maybe get to know them a little bit as people as well as the show itself. So that's kind of the whole concept here. So before we call it an evening, Paul, is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to address, and is there anything that you'd like to ask me?
Oh, see, I wasn't prepared for going into interview mode myself. So I will, as far as what I would like to address is, yeah, come give the show a chance. Obviously, I want you to listen to the more recent interview or recent episodes, and then if you're brave enough, go back to the beginning. But you got to get the most recent ones to kind of get a feel where the show has evolved towards. It's not just satire, pointless satire. There's a reason why I write what I write. And if nothing else, if you don't want to listen to jokes about the Quran, satirical examination of the Quran, or any of the segments that I've got in the show that are part of my edutainment, check out those interviews. They're blatantly, plainly listed on Quranifyme.com, and hear those ex-Muslim stories before you excuse Islam, before you say, it doesn't really pertain to me, I'm an American. Go listen to those interviews and go listen to those personal stories and the suffering that folks go through, and then come back to the show, join the Chronofanatic Army, and become a listener and help me spread the word of this to other folks. And, if you are so kind, either become a patron or donate to AHA, that's AHA Foundation, and help support abused women here in America. And I know that's not an international thing, but when I'll come back on your show when you get in more of an international flavor. How's that sound? Is that fair enough?
Oh, sure.
And so I'm going to put you on the spot for a question for the viewers in the future, since you try to call me out on that. Of all of my female stalkers, which one is the most enticing for Zachrilege? For the Zachrilege Nation, which one is the most enticing of Quranify Me's stalker fem army?
Well, I mentioned, Heretic Woman and Nancy Drew just because, those are the two I've actually communicated with. Although Heretic Woman did a little Southern accent on the latest Atheists on Air this week. That was pretty impressive. I think she's got some range here. I think
He's talented.
getting hired out for the voice talent. So I'm very excited about being able to meet her in person, and I've been enjoying the Beyond the Trailer Park show that she's been doing. That's a little bit of a downside. The more you get to know the people and all the podcasts, you're like, I can't possibly listen to them all unless I try while I'm sleeping. So that's a bit of a problem. So we'll try to work on this harem. I don't know how many show wives you need, but it's always more, right?
Well, yeah, there's never enough. I mean, Mo was the example Muslim, and he had 16. So I've got a couple spaces for rent still, so I'm okay.
Spaces for rent. Oh my. Okay, well, thank you, Paul, for your time and attention. Everybody find Paul on all the social medias at Quranify Me, and that's Quranify Me, and it's not his fault that it's hard to spell. Check out his show on all podcast platforms. Give him 5-star ratings even if he doesn't deserve them, and support him through Patreon, or his next sabbatical might be 12 months. So for Paul, this is a Zachrilege, and that's Zach, Z-A-C-H-I before E. You can find me on Twitter. That's where I am right now, and we'll be back with another episode of Zachrilege, hopefully coming up in a week. So, Paul, thanks again. You rock, and I enjoy the entertainment you offer us.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was a good time.
Thanks a lot, and just stay thinking, everybody, and stay listening. Good night.